At our most recent meeting in July, the FOMC raised the target range for the federal funds rate to 2.25% to 2.5%, which is in the Summary of Economic Projections range of estimates of where the federal funds rate is projected to settle in the longer run.
We investors may be disappointed by Powell's recent statement about interest rates, since we were looking for a sign that the Fed might scale it down later this year if inflation will show signs of slowing. The Fed chair made it clear that he expects rates to remain at levels that should slow the economy for some time. With inflation nearing a 4-decade high, nearly 9%, Powell will certainly emphasize that the Fed is determined to get it down to its 2% target, whatever it takes. However, we all know a recession is already happening, so it might take a little bit longer to get rid of the inflation. Although some of us are skeptical that any Fed intervention will be effective in addressing a modern inflation problem that is very different from the one that existed in the 70s. Back then, a heavily unionized workforce was able to demand wages that kept up or even exceeded price increases.
John Kenneth Galbraith is now Paul Warburg Professor of Economics at Harvard University. Among his other government posts, he was price administrator in World War II and has been ambassador to India. Among his books are included The New Industrial State, the most incisive analysis of our modern American economy. Professor Galbraith, what is the prediction? Will inflation continue?
Well, we've had several years of it, and 2 years when there's been worsening unemployment and no improvement in the inflationary situation. Inflation has this last year been at the rate of, 5.8% a year, no better than it was the year before. This is after 2 years of promises by the Nixon administration. So the only thing one can assume for the future is that it will be like the recent past.
Why does it continue?
Anybody who will believe that it will get better will believe anything.
Galbraith, who was a congressional staffer in the 1980s, helped craft legislation mandating that the Fed's role is not only to maintain price stability, but also to ensure maximum employment. Well, the current inflation today is not caused by wages. Instead, the main cause of price hikes are things that the Fed has little control over, like supply chain disruptions brought on by the pandemic and rising food and energy costs as a result of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The Fed's interest rate increase aren't addressing the issues at its core and are instead making consumers' financial troubles worse. What we're seeing right now is a pressure on working people. It's affecting their home expenses, affecting their interest costs, affecting the next thing that will be affecting, which would be their employment prospects, the capacity to find and hold jobs on their own terms that they find acceptable. So what do we need to do? Well, while there's nothing that we can do about monetary policy, we can begin to prepare for a downturn and job losses in case of a worst case scenario. We need to take at least one step, with the most common step being cutting down on spending. Other steps they're talking about that we could do is also include sticking to a budget, building an emergency fund, paying down debt, and working a side gig.